Hello, everybody, and welcome to Section 3 of the Middle Ages, the Age of Chivalry, which Mr. Loebner was so chivalrous in letting me go first and introducing this section. We see a knight on horseback, and what is chivalry?
I don't know, because I'm not
Apparently,
chivalrous.
exactly.
I don't open doors for people.
Apparently,
or
chivalry
nothing.
is dead.
So chivalry, the idea where a knight will protect his lord, his lady, and his god. So there's a code of ideals that you're supposed to live up to,
Yeah,
although most
honor.
of them didn't.
Sneaky. So these knights, warriors on horseback. Charles Martel, the hammer, sees the Muslims and their cavalry, so riding on horseback, and says, oh, if we put armored men on horseback, these knights, much better in battle. So some simple inventions, which seem silly today, but the saddle keeps you on. So when you're fighting with your sword or whatever it is, you are at a higher position, and hopefully you stay mounted on that horse. And then the stirrup, hold on for dear life while you're, in battle, sieging castles and taking
That's
over.
right. When I was captain of the pony club, I often used my saddle and stirrup in high school.
Oh, really? The polo club or the pony? Oh, pony club.
Yes. All right, so knights, they have to give military service to the lord, so getting back to that idea of feudalism, and they received land in exchange. So they had to fight about 40 days a year, and they were training for war all the time, wrestling and hunting and jousting and
Always
training.
prepared.
Training to become a knight starts at a very young age. At the age of 7, you are a page. You live in another person's castle. You start learning the ways. At the age of 14, you are a squire, where you escort your knight to battle and take care of their
Carry
things.
his sword and, yeah.
And then when you're 21, you are a knight.
Hey, we're being interrupted here. How unchivalrous.
We're filming.
We're filming. Hold on one second. So, the code of chivalry was that, what we talked about before, knights had to fight bravely in defense of their feudal lord, heavenly lord, and their chosen lady. So, honor, respect, and expected to protect those in need.
Okay. They're expected to protect the weak and the poor, but they didn't, and they were usually not punished for that. Cowardly knights would be publicly shamed, and tournaments were a great way to test the knight's courage, and also a spectator sport.
Yeah, jousting, sword fighting, I don't know what else, horseback riding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of weapons in this time period. They had stone castles built where they were protected with guard towers, and that would be the home of the lord and his lady and their family, and the knights and the servants as well. And if people try to attack the castle, they can use boiling water and hot oil, molten lead. They could throw cows off, like in the movie Monty Python.
I was just going to say, they use those catapults to fling diseased bodies and soldiers and heads of
Whatever.
anything they could use to attack.
That's right.
Yeah. It was-
And weapons they had, the battering ram to try to get into the castle, a trebuchet, which is like a giant slingshot, not real tortoise.
yeah. It's like a shell, like to protect you. You'd move with this like covering over you.
That's
Yeah.
right. There's the trebuchet, which can fling objects nearly 1,000 feet.
Cows. There you go.
Small children. There's the mantlet to defend yourself. You can.
Kind of hide behind it. It's almost like in football, when you're behind those like guards, those like practice
That's
equipment.
right.
Yeah.
And the women. Why don't you talk
ladies.
about that?
Oh, I don't know too much about ladies, but so the church viewed them as inferior. So sorry, girls. No matter what we try to do, they kind of keep us to the home, or to the church. And some lucky noble women were able to get estates or the land from their husbands, or defend the castles if the Lord was away. But like it says, they're very rare, and they didn't really receive any status for it. It was just, here you go.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, women, we still don't have those rights.
Okay, so that concludes section 3. We'll do section 4 next.
Go.
All right, we're back with section 4, and this is all about the church, and the church was a huge part of people's lives
Especially
in the
in the
Middle
Middle
Ages,
Ooh.
and the church had a lot of power. So the church and the European governments that are emerging are competing for power. Pope Gelasius believed the Pope should bow to the emperor if it has to do with politics, and the emperor should bow down to the Pope if it has to do with religion. But it didn't always work out that way.
They said if you stay in your area and you stay in yours, we'll be good. But the whole goal is to have power. So if you can have power over the church, and if the church can have power over the people, they're going to fight for that.
But the church was very influential. It bonded people during these tough times. You got the plague and all this warfare, and times are difficult and you're starving. So at least you have the church to try to give you some
Yeah,
sense of.
and it definitely
hope.
bonded people over, no matter what their status was, they just had something in common.
Powers of the church. All Christians, from the kings down to the lowly serfs, they were subject to the laws of the church. This is known as canon law. And if
Which
you-
we'll see a little bit later with Henry VIII and his divorces.
That's right. If you're a bad Christian, they can banish you from the church, and then you are excommunicated. And the
Cut
Pope
out.
has this power over political rulers. So the Pope can deny you from being saved. And if you can't go to church, you aren't going to be saved.
And this was huge because if you were excommunicated or kicked out of the church, you couldn't get the sacraments. And part of getting the sacraments was part of your religious duty, which also meant going to heaven and like reaching that salvation. So if you couldn't get communion or baptism or whatever it was, then you were stuck.
That's right.
Yeah.
You said duty. Interdict. That's a religious service not allowed in a king's land. This is another power that the church had. If they take away people's church, then the whole community is going to hell, maybe. So that was one way to threaten people.
Yeah, and I don't think it happened very much, but it was a way to keep the king in check because they could just threaten, okay, well, not just you, but all of your people. And it would not be pretty.
So here's an example of this clash between the politics and religion. Lay investiture is a ceremony where kings and nobles can choose church officials, which the church didn't like.
Exactly, and those people, those bishops, could work for the kings or the nobles, and there could be a lot of conflict there.
So the Pope, Gregory VII, banned lay investiture, and Henry IV, the German emperor, ordered him to step down. So the Pope says no.
He's very angry.
He excommunicated Henry, so now Henry's in trouble.
Yes. So actually, Henry, which I don't know if this is on the next slide, I couldn't remember, but Henry went to plead for forgiveness from the Pope. I think he was outside for like 3 days in the snow in just his cloak, no shoes, nothing. And so the Pope eventually has to forgive him, but
Spoiler, that is coming
spoiler.
up.
Oh man, I didn't realize that.
So, like Ms. Bannis said, the Pope made him wait outside for 3 days, and eventually they're going to solve the issue with the Concordant of Worms, which is a compromise where the church can pick the bishops, but the emperor has the power to veto a nomination.
Ooh, kind of like our government. Checks
right.
and balances.
All right, that concludes the exciting section 4.